there, it's Leona. Welcome to Zen Mindfulness Shodo. Today, we're gonna practice Shodo meditation while focusing on the Kanji character for book. So let's begin our beautiful journey together. When you write a character, imagine a square about the size of the character that you are gonna write like this. First, I'm gonna write it. Then I'm gonna explain the points and tips for writing the character beautifully in detail. Alright, now I'm gonna explain the points and tips for writing this character beautifully. The way of writing the first 4 strokes of this character is the same as the Kanji character, tree. The first stroke starts from a point a bit lower than and to the left of the center point of the top left square. Place the brush at about a 45-degree angle while holding it straight up. Lightly push the brush towards the tip of it and stabilize the brush. After you stabilize the brush, the stroke moves to the right until the middle vertical line is in the middle of the stroke. At the end, like the beginning point of the stroke, lightly push the brush towards the tip of it, just for a second, without pushing the brush down. That way, the jagged edges of the brush won't be visible in the lines. If you leave the brush for too long at the end of the stroke, the ink will bleed and make the line thicker. Also, if you apply too much pressure on the brush, it'll create a lump under the line. Therefore, after you move the brush to the right, lightly stop for about a second with the same brush pressure. The second stroke starts from a point a bit higher than the middle of the top half of the middle vertical line, or a point a bit lower than the top line of the square box. Place the brush at about a 45-degree angle, like the beginning point of the first stroke, and lightly push the brush towards the tip of it and stabilize the brush. The stroke moves straight down on the middle vertical line until the middle horizontal line is in the middle of the stroke, or until the space above the starting point of the stroke and the space below the end point of the stroke are almost the same size. At the end, like the starting point of the first stroke, lightly push the brush towards the tip of it for a second. It looks like the ink is bleeding a little here, so I think I applied too much pressure on the brush here or stopped for too long. If you do this, the lines will blur a little like this, so be careful. The third stroke starts at the crossing point of the previous 2 strokes. It lightly stops at the beginning point for a second, like trying to divide the space between the previous 2 strokes in half. It scoops downward to the left at about a 45-degree angle while curving down and getting thinner. When the end point is too far left from the beginning point of the first stroke, the third stroke looks too long for the entire character. On the other hand, when the end point is too far right from the starting point of the first stroke, the third stroke looks too short for the entire character. So, for the end point of the third stroke, aim for around the bottom of the first stroke. This area was bright with sunlight, so I closed the blinds, so now I don't think it's bright anymore. Sorry about that if it was hard to see. After scooping downward to the left, with this kind of brush movement, it goes up to the top right from the end point of the third stroke, and the fourth stroke starts from the second stroke, a bit lower than the first stroke. Lightly attach only the tip of the brush to the second stroke. And this stroke might look straight, but when writing it, I create it with a slight upward curve. It moves downward to the right at about a 45-degree angle while getting thicker. When it comes to the same height as the end point of the third stroke, it checks to the right. Gradually lift the brush from the paper as it moves to the right. Let the tip of the brush leave the paper to create the pointy part. This stroke can be written straight, but if you write it with a downward curve, for example, if you move the brush downward to the right with a downward curved line like this, the space inside becomes narrow. We want this inner space to form a triangular shape and be about the same size as the triangular shape on the left side. So, when moving the brush down to the right, writing with a straight line or slightly upward curved line will make the overall character look neater. The fifth stroke starts from a point a bit higher than the end point of the third stroke. If the third stroke becomes shorter than this and ends up around this height, in that case, instead of starting the fifth stroke from a point slightly higher than the end point of the third stroke, it's better to start the fifth stroke from around this height. That way the overall balance of the character will look better. In such a case where the third stroke ends up pretty short, try to cross at a height where the part above the first stroke and the part below the fifth stroke are almost the same length. After the brush is stabilized, the stroke moves upward to the right, parallel to the first stroke, while curving up just a tiny bit until the second stroke is in the middle of the stroke. Try not to attach both the beginning and end points of the fifth stroke to these two diagonal strokes completely. You can touch them just a tiny bit, but it looks more beautiful when the 45-degree angle of the starting point and the round shape of the end points are clearly visible like this. One key point in writing the character for book beautifully is the angle of the third and fourth strokes. This also applies when writing the character for tree. I'm gonna write examples here. After you made the first two strokes, if you create the third stroke like this, and the fourth stroke that mirrors the third stroke like this, the angles of the two strokes are closer to the middle horizontal line. If you make the angles of these two diagonal strokes closer to the middle horizontal line, when you write the fifth stroke, the end points of the third and fourth strokes will be higher than the beginning and end points of the fifth stroke. This makes the overall character look less neat. On the other hand, after you created the first two strokes, if you made the third stroke like this, the angle is closer to the middle vertical line. The fourth stroke mirrors the third stroke. So the angle of the fourth stroke will be closer to the middle vertical line as well. If you do that, the inside space becomes narrow, and when writing the fifth stroke, the starting and end points will touch the two diagonal strokes. And looking at the entire character, it becomes overly slim overall, appearing less stable compared to this shape of character book. Therefore, instead of opening up the angle of the third and fourth strokes too wide, or closing it too narrow, if you keep the angle in this middle range, dividing the space between the first and second strokes into two equal parts, it will look more balanced and beautiful overall. Another key point would be the length of the third and fourth strokes. If you create these diagonal strokes like this, in this case, the end point of the third stroke is too far right from the starting point of the first stroke. So the third stroke looks too short for the first two strokes, and the fourth stroke mirrors the third stroke. So both strokes appear to be too short for the first two strokes. When you write the last stroke, like the first example on the top left, the end points of the two diagonal strokes are higher than the starting and end points of the fifth stroke, and that makes the character look unbalanced a little bit overall. On the other hand, if you create the third stroke like this, in this case, The end point is to the left of the starting point of the first stroke, and almost at the same height as the end point of the second stroke. This means the third stroke is too long for the first two strokes. The fourth stroke mirrors the third stroke, so the fourth stroke becomes too long for the entire character as well. When you write the last stroke, the end points of the third and fourth strokes are lower than the fifth stroke. However, these diagonal stroke proportions look too long for the entire character, so the character doesn't look balanced and beautiful. Therefore, in addition to maintaining the appropriate angle, aim for not making the diagonal strokes too short or too long. Keep their length somewhere in this middle range. Another way to judge where the lengths of the third and fourth strokes are appropriate is, for example, if the angle formed by connecting the endpoints of the third stroke, second stroke, and fourth stroke is around 30 degrees. The character for book will be this kind of shape. For this character, the angle is closer to the middle vertical line. It's about 60 degrees. For this character, the angle is very close to the middle horizontal line. Therefore, if you can write it so that the angle formed by connecting the endpoints of these three strokes is neither too close to the middle vertical line nor too close to the middle horizontal line, but somewhere in this middle range, the overall balance of the character will look good and neat. Alright, keep these points and tips in mind when you practice. The key points and tips for writing kanji beautifully, as explained in the video, are concisely summarized in this book. Additionally, easily understandable Zen mindsets and philosophical messages are shared in this book. For those who want to practice directly in this book, I've also prepared a workbook. The writing tips and techniques are the same as in the Zen Mindfulness Shodo book. Each page allows you to practice one character. If you're interested, please see the description. When you practice with a brush, I recommend that you place a few pieces of paper under the page that you're writing on, so that the ink doesn't bleed onto the page under it. Alright, let's get started. Before you start writing, take a deep breath and clear your mind. Slowly breathe in as much air as you can through your nose. Exhale all the negative emotions that you've been holding until this moment through your mouth. When you are mentally ready to write, you can start writing. Check the starting point, end point, the angle of the stroke, and the direction of the curve. After that, without hesitation, aim for the end point and move the brush smoothly. Try to write slower than you normally write, putting your heart and soul into each stroke. However, if you move the brush too slowly, the ink will bleed and the lines will become thicker in areas where you don't want them to be thicker. And if you move the brush too quickly, the ink will fade and the lines will become thinner in areas you don't want them to be thinner. Or the ink will disappear midway through, making the strokes shorter than you want them to be. So, concentrate on finding the right speed. Once you've finished writing the character, look at the character as a whole and think about what changes you should make next in order to make it look even more beautiful. Try analyzing the character you wrote yourself, looking at aspects such as, is the upward angle of the first stroke appropriate? Were you able to create the second stroke straight, tracing the middle vertical line? Is the third stroke dividing the space between the first and second strokes? and not too close to the middle horizontal line or middle vertical line? Is the length of the third stroke not too short or not too long? Does the angle of the fourth stroke have a good balance with the third stroke? Is the length not too short or not too long? Is the check to the right of the fourth stroke around the same height as the end point of the third stroke? Is the height of the fifth stroke well balanced with the overall character? And the start and end points of the fifth stroke not stuck too close to the third and fourth strokes, obscuring their shape? Of course, you don't have to take all the tips and points that I've told you and copy my way of writing the character. Trust your own sense of beauty and adjust accordingly. It's important that you're satisfied with the shapes of the characters you write. So, please use my tips and points as ideas and hints for adjusting the shape of the character to your sense of beauty. Of course, you can't change the shape so much that it no longer looks like a character. If you notice that you're thinking about something else while writing, immediately focus on what you are writing. By repeating this exercise, you'll be able to notice when your attention starts to turn to something unrelated to your current action and gradually improve your concentration and self-control. You can also build your patience with this practice. So, let's practice together. It's just natural that we are unable to create perfectly satisfying strokes every time. Instead of blaming yourself for not being able to make strokes that you want, try praising yourself for taking on difficult challenges. On this channel, I not only share tips and points for writing Japanese characters beautifully with a pen and a brush in both English and Japanese, but also practice Zen Mindfulness Shodo meditation that focuses all of our attention on the present moment. If you want to learn how to write other characters, or if you want to use this channel to learn Japanese language, or if you want to keep practicing Zen Mindfulness Shodo meditation with me, please subscribe to my channel and click the bell mark so you get a notification as soon as I upload a new video. Alright, let's learn and practice together again in my next video. Thank you for watching.